how I might use Obsidian to execute one of my creative endeavors. I'm trying to develop a TV show.
I think that'd be pretty interesting.
I don't even know what I know. I don't even know what I don't know. I feel like an immigrant in the late 19th century, coming over from Ireland, with my little bag of my most precious possessions.
That's a great analogy because it's a fraught time. It's a fragile time. Either one is going to be repelled from this, or one might just figure out enough to feel the breakthrough.
Yay, woo! My first map of content. Today, we are diving into one of the most new, up-and-coming, exciting second brain apps, which is, of course, Obsidian. I have invited into the studio Nick Milo, who is really one of the, if not the top expert in how to use Obsidian specifically and this category of link-based note-taking apps. Welcome.
Hey, Tiago, I'm happy to be here.
I've been perusing YouTube and noticed there are tons of Obsidian 101, Obsidian getting started videos, which are all excellent, but I don't really want to do the same thing as those. What I'd really like to get into is something that I think we're both passionate about, which is not just storing and organizing a lot of notes just for the sake of it, but actually using it to deliver, to ship concrete creative projects. How about we dive into how I might use Obsidian to execute one of my creative endeavors?
I think that'd be pretty interesting, especially for someone who is not so used to Obsidian. I think we should give it a spin and see what happens.
I looked through my project list, and the one that is sort of most interesting but also challenging that I think we can apply this new kind of software to is a TV show, which we've talked about before. You also have a background in the TV industry. I'm trying to develop a TV show, like a legit, on TV, on Netflix television show about building a second brain. It's a completely new creative medium and industry that I have no prior experience with.
I think getting started with a TV show, breaking into a new industry is the perfect sort of huge effort and project where you really need to be able to synthesize. Evernote, like you'll say, is a fantastic capturing and organizing tool, but how do we distill? How do we synthesize? How do we make these connections happen where we have a really excellent understanding of a new field or industry? So I'm really excited to see where this goes.
This is Evernote, which I've been using for many, many years. And Evernote excels at capturing. And what I tend to do is create a project folder, or in Evernote's language, a project notebook, which is simply just a container where I just dump. It's like dropping, letters through a slot, all sorts of little tidbits of, like I said, podcasts, YouTube videos, books, different things. And then there's a specific moment in my creative workflow that I have a lot of difficulty with, and that I'm almost, if I'm being honest, kind of embarrassed by, which is the moment that I open up that, it's almost like a cardboard box, and I look in there. I know there's lots of good stuff because I've chosen it, but it's a mess, and I need to make sense of it. And Evernote, this is where Evernote kind of fails. It doesn't have very sophisticated tools for kind of restructuring and distilling and analyzing the contents that I've collected. So you see here the TV show project folder. And if I open this up a little bit, you can see I've saved 28 notes.
So right now, how are these organized?
I always organize using date created, which is really reverse chronologically. So the most recent things that I've saved are at the top, and then the first things that I saved were at the bottom.
It really helps to have that chronological, time-based way of remembering. One way, though, that these next-generation thinking tools like Obsidian can help us are that it allows us to think not so much through time, but through relationships. Evernote, for everything that it does right, doesn't quite give us this digital workbench where you mentioned those cards in the container. So imagine you could throw all those cards onto a digital workbench, and you can have an infinite amount of these, and you can just start shuffling them. So you have these clusters, and through those clusters, they're telling stories, and you can kind of recognize between this cluster and this cluster, something's missing. And then when you map that gap, there's generally a new insight that's been generated. You might have some clarity. At the very least, you'll have a lot of calm knowing that all of your notes on something are in this sort of visual spatial arrangement that you can come back to a month, a year later and pick up right where you left off.
If you were coaching me on how to, let's say I'm stuck, I don't really know what to do next, would we start by bringing all this content straight into Obsidian?
Because we're looking at 28 notes, I'd say yes. I'd be a little bit more cautious about bringing in thousands of notes. Personally, what I would do is I would do a copy and paste.
Okay, I think I'm just gonna do that. It's gonna take a bit. Let me just do a few so you can see what I'm doing here. Let's see, I think I'll start at the bottom with the oldest. Should I take the title? Do Obsidian notes have titles, or is it really just the body?
I would use the same title as the title for the note.
Okay, I'm gonna copy, head over to Obsidian, and then do I just
Hit
do
this icon.
this one right here?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. And then select all is my friend here.
There are a few file names that you'll have to change. Anytime that there's a dash, the reason that that has to be changed is because a tool like Obsidian only looks at the file name in the same way that your computer does. So that title from Mark Manson's article, that's definitely not going to work because it has the @ symbol, the %sign, and I don't think those work in a regular file name. So whatever would work on your regular File Explorer or Finder is what you'll have to use for titles in Obsidian.
It seems like we basically just copied and pasted with the one caveat of removing or changing characters such as colons, slashes, and things like that. We have, in a sense, migrated. I feel like an immigrant in the late 19th century, you know, coming over from Ireland like my ancestors did, you know, with my little bag of my most precious possessions. I've made it to the new world with a few supplies. I don't even know where to go next. What would you look at next?
Well, that's a great analogy because it's a fraught time. It's a fragile time, and either one is going to be repelled from this, or one might just figure out enough to feel the breakthrough. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a new note. So go ahead and hit Command N or create a new file, however you'd like. And let's, call it a TV show, map, TV show, hub, whatever comes to mind. This is going to be our note about all the other notes. So if we're thinking on levels, we're moving from the forest, we're moving from Ellis Island, and we're going to start to go up into a helicopter or into a skyscraper, and we're going to look around and see everything.
So this is one of, I think, your trademark concepts, which is maps of content, MOCs.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
I actually want to create structure. I want a note with links to all the other notes, and then I can move around those links. I threw out those concepts, and people are like, wow, this is helping me. This is helping me make sense of my thing that I'm working on. So this is what we're doing. Now we have content. Now we're just going to throw it into this map, TV show hub. Let's first pin this note. So if you click on the 3 dots, we can go ahead and pin the note. And the way to think about that is if we have this whole workbench and we have about 30 notes on it, we're just saying the hub is the most important, and we're going to place it right here. And then we know no matter what we're looking at over here, we can always go back to the map. So now what we need to do is get all of these notes into the map, into the TV show hub. So if you just click on the first one at the top, that's going to open a new tab. And if you just drag that over to the right a bit. Okay. So now if you click on the top and then drag and select all of these notes, now simply just drag and drop them into the hub.
Ooh.
Okay, cool. So let's close that. And now if you hit here, we can minimize the sidebar. We don't need a sidebar anymore. All the information is on the map. It's a mess right now, and it should be. So we're going to do the most low-tech thing possible in this high-tech solution. We're just going to start clustering related notes. And this is going to become a really rich sense-making process. Now, for everyone watching, it won't feel as awesome as I hope it does for you, because the person going through it is essentially the chef, is the person that's making something.
Okay. So if I understood correctly, I'm just sort of going through and basically grouping these into related notes.
That's it.
Yeah. I think I can do that. Let's see, can I just create space? So to create a heading to then put bullet points under, do I just start typing? Is it just...
We're not going to start with the headers. One of the advantages of Obsidian is that it allows you to be bottom up with a project. Now imagine, kind of like this one a little bit, you just have a bunch of notes and you start to maybe feel, I'm going to lose some of the connections I have in my mind about this information. So that's when you know it's time to create a map. That's what we've done with TV Show Hub. And I would just start grouping them. And then the titles will reveal themselves.
Let me see if I can do this. This is already a change of habits, which is good.
One way to make this a little bit easier is if you select all, and let's go ahead and hit one of the most important hotkeys in Obsidian, which is Command or Control P. And that's the command palette. Now from here, let's go ahead and type bullet, and hopefully we can make this into a toggle bullet list. So let's try that. That'll just give us a little bit of perspective. So some of these have long file names, and now we can see which ones they actually are.
So let's see if I can see any connections. The obvious one is partially because it's the headlines of these newspaper articles. There's news, there's like recent news about social media, about Hollywood, the Hollywood strike, the Hollywood shutdown. These are all related.
Well, what I do is the line above, I would just start hitting enter, and I'd put them into their little tiny group, like their visual group.
Like here.
Enter a couple times. Yeah, just create and keep that space. Be comfortable with the space for now.
So create one more so that it's
create another space. And then same thing on the bottom side.
Here. Like that. So I would just say Hollywood news.
Great.
That's this one too. So for now, I'll just copy paste, cut paste. Like that. Yep, that's all the news.
An easy one that I see here are the bottom ones. They all have the same title. So I don't know, that's a podcast?
Yeah, it's a podcast about reality television.
Okay. So, I mean, we could group that, we could call it reality television, you could call it something else. They definitely need to exist together. I think we can agree that they just belong together.
Yeah, I think I can say what it's about, but also the kind of information. My notes from all these podcast episodes are basically the same, because in each episode he's diving into specific shows. And so I'm seeing models, examples, case studies. So I kind of already know what kind of notes are in these.
And part of this is because if you listen to another one and you have notes, you know where they go, and you might be able to start relating them to some of these other examples.
Definitely.
Say, oh, that reminds me of Casey Brummels.
By putting these bullets under this piece of text, is there a relationship created?
Let's go ahead and make it a header.
Okay.
Then we will have a relationship.
So like this.
With space. Now you can see that we can collapse that header, and that will collapse.
The reason I ask is, in the future, if I can't remember the name of this podcast or the host or whatever, if I search reality TV, is there a way to jump from reality TV to the bullet points underneath this header?
Let's see. If we go ahead and hit Command-Shift-F, which is going to open up a global search. And if you just hit reality TV, let's see how that search pulls up.
Yeah, basically right here.
It's there, and we can see it's not the clearest example. It's just, we can just see that there's a header reality TV. So I'd say partially.
So if I click this search result, it just takes me there, and then I can just look under it at least.
Yes.
Okay.
So if we now collapse the sidebar again.
Yeah, I think there's not that many categories. Another one is my own brainstorms.
Personally, I put those right at the top. So your stuff goes above all the other research that's being gathered.
Okay, this one I believe is also my own ideas.
Seems like there's a grouping in here that seemed having something to do with industry trends.
Yes, I'd say right here. This is actually more of an example, but it's not a reality TV example. Oh, it's not an example, it's ideas. It's like content ideas for what specific episodes could be about.
And I love how you put it, though. Initially, your thought was where, like, you had the reality TV examples. So you thought, okay, of course, I'll put it close to that. This is where it starts to come alive just a little bit. I just say keep going.
Okay, so this is a new category, which is like talent preparation. What does the talent do? This, I would say, is storytelling.
And see what just happened there? You created some space, and then all we do now is map the gap. And the way that we're mapping it now, because we already have a bunch of notes, is to give headers. Another way to map is to say, I need more information here. It might just be, I have paragraph 1 and 3. It's obvious now I need a middle paragraph. It's just getting us really comfortable with mapping all the knowledge that we have, recognizing how they go together, and recognizing what's missing.
I'm gonna say another one, which is convos with experts. Had a few interesting dinners and lunches with people.
Experts are just people. I'd be the people there.
This is actually a different category, which is almost like pitch material. So we made a highlight reel of me coaching different people in my courses. So if someone said, hey, I want to see, how would you coach someone on second brain stuff? I could be like, well, here you go. This is actually a different one, which is like big ideas, big framing. You can see that category is sparse right now. There we go.
Well, for one, congratulations. So we have a map of content.
Yay, woo! My first map of content.
How much of it was needed, only you can really decide. And this all keep this in mind. Not every project needs a map. So we don't just have to waste all of our time creating a map when all we have to do is write a 700-word article from the heart. Like that's going to come from us. We don't need all this outside research.
Especially when tackling something new, in this case, a new creative medium, a new industry, a new kind of project. I don't even know what I know. I don't even know what I don't know. There's so much unknowingness that I'm just trying to get my bearings. It's like I was dropped in the wilderness and I'm just like, okay, there's a mountain over there, there's a stream. The most basic orientation is what I'm seeking.
Next thing that you might want to do is look at all these headers and say, are they in an order that I like? You can just give a quick look through this and you might already say, this is good enough for me. Or you might say, well, this one should be higher up, this one should be a little bit lower down.
You know what's funny is my instinct is to do the opposite of what you said and put the sort of external research first. I don't even have many of my own ideas, and the ones I do have I don't trust because I don't have enough context. And that's why you can see here, I'm reading the news. I'm reading what's going on in the industry. The only order that suggests itself is the order of things that are drawing my attention more at the top. And currently that tends to be more kind of external facing research.
However it's going to work for your brain, it should be the way it is. The other part is it can always change.
Yes, and I think it will change. As I gain more background, more context, more confidence, I think that will flip. I don't necessarily trust anything that I see in the external world. So I almost think of this as a waterfall where I'm collecting things from the external world and the best ideas are sort of filtering down. They're like sifting down through the soil so that the best ones end up at the end as something that's been interpreted kind of through my lens. Okay, and then I'll just move this. Okay. That to me somehow fits how my brain is thinking right now.
That's really cool to see how you did this. And I'm thinking for myself, I usually have a reverse approach where I'd put my stuff at the top and then the research down below. And again, it's just a personal preference. So now you have this hub, you have this digital workbench. It has inherent meaning that I couldn't possibly know in the choices that you made. That means that recall improves immediately. The chances that you'll be like, yeah, it was there, it was like halfway down, research this podcast. You'll just start seeing those things. And it's a mechanism for learning. You're understanding how all these parts relate because you have to map it out yourself.
We talked about how a lot of the research that I have here, it's an example, say, from Hollywood that I then almost need to do a second stage of thinking about. I need to decide or just analyze what idea does this give me? What decision do I make? What do I want to do? What do I want to not do based on this? There's almost like a meta layer of thinking that I need to add. Is there a good way for me to take note of that sort of meta level in Obsidian?
Yes, big time. So this is something that is usually called making an evergreen note. And so it's a new note. It usually has a really strong title, and we'll get to one of these, I hope. A really strong title that you made, so you'll remember it, and it encapsulates something really important. And the way to think about that is it now exists, and now you can link other ideas to it in the future. Maybe a good place to start would be with industry trends. We're just going to make it visible as its own note. So now we can link to that really important point again and again in random ways in the coming weeks and months.
Okay, so let's give this a try. This is a newspaper article. I'll just kind of narrate what I'm thinking. It's pretty short. Notice that I did not save the whole article, and that's one of my top pieces of advice. Do not mass scale save huge amounts of content. Really just save the parts that resonate with you. And then I've also done a little bit of bolding of some of the ideas I found really the most resonant. So I'm just going to kind of jump around, focusing mostly on the bold points to kind of, I basically need to remind myself, what is this even about? What was I thinking when I decided to save this? It's essentially this sentence right here. I was thinking of television shows, you know, like Netflix, but if you think of TV broadly, who watches TV, according to this article, is people in their 50s, maybe as young as their 40s. It's one piece of research, but that already makes me think about my TV show differently. I need to have something in the design of the show appeal to people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, even 70s for it to be successful.
That's amazing. And in what you just said, I heard 3 different possible evergreen notes. I can't recite them, but something along the lines of the older population that's viewing TV. Go right below that bolding and just hit bracket, and then type something bad. This is going to be your bad first draft of an evergreen note.
TV is mostly for middle-aged people and above. What's going on here? Why does it say no match found?
When you hit bracket, it's creating a global search throughout the entire Obsidian Ideaverse, if you will. And what that means is, over time, you might recognize that you have multiple evergreen notes that start with TV. And then you'll be reminded of what you just wrote here. You'll be reminded of other ones. And so basically, it's functioning as an Ask Jeeves. Like, did you mean this one? Did you mean this one? One, it's a way to get those kind of behavior-based repetitions, way better than rote-based, in my opinion, for remembering and learning something, because you're like, okay, those are my notes on TV, because I just searched TV. That's such a great term, and these came up.
Okay, so there's no match found because I don't have many notes in Obsidian yet. Am I done? Do I just hit return?
If you click away and then click on it, it now has become a real note.
Interesting.
So it was only a placeholder note. And what is super interesting about that, and I find this a lot with people, I'll encounter some person and I'll give them the bracket treatment. So now they become a placeholder note, but it's only maybe months later when I make them into a note and realize, whoa, they already have 6 links to them. And at the bare minimum, here's what I like to do when I have a new evergreen note title like this. Number 1, we're going to go into settings so we can see the backlinks below the note itself.
So I'll go up here. Oh, backlinks?
There you go. So we've just turned on backlinks so we can see them within the note. And this is just helpful to know, where did you create that note? And in this case, it'll take you right back to all your research on the actual article.
So could you just briefly explain backlinks for someone that's not familiar with that?
In fact, the better term there, in my mind, is what we see on screen here, which is a linked mention. So that means in the article or in the note that we see here, it mentions the note we're in. And so we can always click on that and then we can go back to this article. And the last thing that I like to do, because I really like to create a network that I'm confident in, I'll usually link back up from this evergreen note to whatever that project or knowledge base I'm really focused on.
Okay.
So in this case, what would you do?
Brackets and then TV show hub?
Yeah.
Like that?
And then boom, and it all goes back to the map.
TV show hub is linking to this note, and now this note is linking back to that one. It's like reverse. Would it make sense to create a new section that is like evergreen ideas or my own?
Are you feeling that need?
I kind of am. I notice, well tell me, I'm afraid of losing that insight that I just created because it's not actually contained. It's not, in Evernote, it would be contained here. It would be like a section at the top of the note that says takeaways from this note.
I would use that map, that hub, as my single source of truth. Everything goes back to the hub.
Interesting. So instead of a project folder, you have a project hub.
That allows you to sense make on the fly.
Interesting.
Manually is going to be the best way to start, just by hitting the 2 brackets, typing TV, and then we'd see that it shows up. Well, it's right at the top because it's recent. And so boom. And then you can figure out however you would want to organize it there. More advanced workflows, you can tag it. And then you can have this really cool saved search that we might call a query, and that would show up and it would present with you within this note all of the notes that might have that tag. And we can go even further, which we can say all the notes that have that tag that aren't already in your hub. So this is fantastic for research because you're like, is it already in this big list of 30 items? and it will tell you immediately, no, it's not. And then you just drag it up to its spot.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's like catching things that are falling through the cracks.
Yes.
Okay, so let's do another one of those, just as an example. So this one jumps out at me. I remember this being shocking to see that number. It's so astronomically more expensive than any kind of creative medium I have ever had any experience with. 1.6 to $6 million makes me just conclude TV episodes are astronomically expensive and thus need outside funders. This kind of speaks to almost a question I still have, which is, do I really need to go the traditional studio route? Couldn't I just go on YouTube, let's say, since we're here, and make this show myself? Well, according to what I'm seeing here, if I want to reach the production levels that I see when I turn on my TV, this seems to be what it currently costs, which kind of is a mindset shift.
And just all your commentary around getting to this evergreen statement, if you will, is so valuable. It's creating those questions that you're just bringing up. Could I do this independently? What would that look like? Independently, it only costs this much, but that production value that comes with adding a zero to the end of a budget.
Or two.
Yeah, exactly.
Could I even take note of that very question?
Absolutely. And you could do it here, or you could do it in that evergreen note. Because we kept the other one empty, right? We just kept it as an empty note. But now you can do it here.
Does it make sense to sort of basically put a prefix that tells my future self what this is? Or is it?
Absolutely. You can go crazy with the prefixes, but it just happens naturally. So like, notice how TV was what you naturally put at the start of both of these evergreen notes.
Yeah.
So you've already started to do that. But yeah, you can do the cues for sure for question. It's just nice to see how this is already coming together. It's creating these questions. And again, I value these questions so much that are generated. I'll go back to the TV show hub and I'll make sure to throw them in evergreen takeaways, and maybe that grows a subsection, but we're just creating our own thoughts.
So we've already, in a pretty short time, looked at a number of features. We looked at some of the Obsidian settings. We opened different tabs and sidebars. We explored how to create links, how you can, in the process of creating a link, create a whole new note, which then becomes a whole nother place to store ideas. We looked at headers. We looked at how when you're typing and creating a new note, it searches your database. We actually covered quite a bit of ground. And I feel like I could really use what you've already taught me today to actually make real progress on this real project. Is there anything else that people should think about or keep in mind if they're getting started with Obsidian?
Basically, no. Like, this is enough.
After going through this and really kind of seeing how much rich material I have, that's a good starting batch, right? 28 pieces of evidence, 28 sources is quite a bit of research. I think what I would try to do, now that I kind of feel empowered by that knowledge, is to try and write the treatment, which we will be sending to production companies to try to get a meeting. And I might fail. I might notice, oh, I'm missing this and this and this and this, but then I can just go back to this hub right here and fill in those missing pieces. Well, Nick, this has been an absolute learning adventure. Thank you so much for coming all the way here to teach us. By the way, if you heard anything in this conversation, whether we addressed it directly or just mentioned in passing, that you would like to know more about, Nick has one of the absolute best YouTube channels with videos on every aspect of Obsidian that you can imagine, and also just this more natural, modern way of thinking and working in general. I highly recommend you give him a follow. What's your channel called?
It's called Linking Your Thinking.
And if you want to see more of us talking about these ideas, head over to the Linking Your Thinking channel, and you can see an in-depth interview that we did about how I personally use different digital tools to think better.